And now to our discussion segment. The federal government recently released the full breakdown of allocations to ministries, departments, and agencies, MDAs, in the 2026 appropriation bill, laying bare how trillions of naira will be deployed across security, infrastructure, governance, and social development. Analysis of the figures shows that the Federal Ministry of Finance received the lion's share of 16.78 trillion naira for debt servicing and statutory transfers, followed by Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning at 9.1 trillion naira. Infrastructure development takes center stage with 3.49 trillion naira for the Ministry of Works, defense at 3.15 trillion naira, education at 2.4 trillion naira, and health at 2.15 trillion naira, among other sectors. Now, as we deliberate or continue to talk about this, the National Assembly today on this, to talk about this particular allocation to different sectors, we have in our studios Dr. Emeka Okengwu to actually help us understand what these allocations will mean for the economy. I believe, Dr. Okengwu, you are an advocate that before we begin to talk about the budget breakdown, I believe you're an advocate of free trade, and with what we are seeing in Abu Dhabi, what do you make of the development? We understand that for exporters, with this agreement signed between Nigeria and UAE, UAE eliminating tariffs on over 7,000 Nigerian products under the CEPA. How quickly do you expect Nigerian agricultural and industrial exports to gain traction in the UAE market, and which sectors
okay, I think
stand to benefit?
you've put three questions into one, so let's decouple. First, yes, I am more of an advocate of production, okay, production-based trade, than I am an advocate of trade.
Okay.
Because you can trade goods and services that are not produced locally, because it's only when you localize your production that you can now begin to now stretch your GDP to now properly value chain, into your rail sector development. I think I need to make that point very clearly.
Okay.
Now, having said that, 7,000 is a huge number, and if we're able to meet it, if we're able to meet even 1,000 products that are going to be taken into the UAE duty-free, that's going to be huge. Okay. One area I think we should just focus on would be, even if we're able to do mutin, okay, as mutin being a byproduct of ram breeding, and then do ram as a major export, you would know what that would mean, going into the UAE. So agriculture will there, of course, naturally, be the one that is driving, a lot of what is on that list, because every other thing that might be top-notch, oil, gas, is like they say in my place, taking a cry to a house where somebody had died. We might not be able to do much in that area of oil and gas with the UAE and, of course, the whole of our Arab world. But if we focus on agriculture, which will have, I believe, comparative advantage, and then we're able to do it in such a way that we're not only producing the volumes required, but we're also now making it, our packaging and our products globally competitive, and then meeting global standards. And then it's a big win for us.
Okay. Industrialization. Let's look at the industrialization angle, the impact that particular agreement will actually have. With Nigeria eliminating tariffs of 6,000 products, including industrial inputs and capital goods, how will this access, to cheaper inputs drive local manufacturing and enhance the country's productive capacity? Because you said you're an advocate of production.
Again, your question again double-barreled. You don't mix industrialization, with inputs, because it is easy. It is possible for you to actually import all your industrial inputs. Now, so if you're talking about industrialization, then you must be going to your back end. And I give you example with your polyamers and polyesters, okay, which are, your primary inputs into your plastics, and even clothing, if you may, when you start stretching that value. Now, if you don't have your oil and gas, producing those maybe what you call the waste that you now convert into your industrial products, it's surprising and amazing that we are still importing a lot of these industrial inputs, okay, even for fertilizers. So industrialization is a good one. You mentioned inputs also. Yes, if we are able, to expand our input production. I'll give you another typical example. Let me now move from oil and gas to something that is more sustainable. At one time, we had found a cure, and I didn't say treatment, for diabetes. Okay, I followed that program, and then the proof of concept was done. The product was approved, but it didn't hit the market. I think a company bought rights, from government or from the researchers. And when they asked them why they were not commercializing, they said they were not commercializing because they didn't have, enough of a raw material input required for them to go into commercial production. And if you may ask me what this raw material input is, it is bitter leaf and scent leaf. They were not getting enough, to be able to now, extract those phyto extras that they needed to now get into commercial production, of the drugs that was curing or will cure diabetes. And this is a Nigerian thing. So sometimes it's important that when you're discussing inputs, you don't discuss it, in generic terms. It's good you drill it down so that you also understand the import, of making certain that you are detailed when you talk about these your industrial inputs. Because something drives industrialization. And what drives industrialization, in elementary economics, I'm sure they taught you that in secondary school, factors of production, nearness to market, nearness to raw materials, infrastructure, storage, energy, and all that. Now, that's elementary, but easy to understand. But it is really at the core of when you want to now talk about, trying to drill it down or trying to, do some kind of deep diving. So it's important that in looking at what has happened, yes, it's commendable that we have that opening, okay, and it's duty-free. That is what is good. Now, but it's not enough for you to sign that paper. You must be able to also meet the standards. If we're talking about agricultural products or hair products, in the past 20 years, a lot of our products have failed, to make it into the international market because of sometimes, overuse of pesticides. So there has to be, again, another focus and primary focus on making certain that standards, are oversighted and maintained, and then outputs now meet international standards. And that's also important when I wanted to take on your input and industrialization. But to answer you directly, of course, the answer is in the question, yes. It will create your industrial base and expand it.
Okay, let's move our attention to budget breakdown or allocation to different sectors. Now, with 16.78 trillion naira allocated to the Ministry of Finance, mostly for debt servicing. Is Nigeria's debt profile sustainable?
It's a yes and no question, depending on what angle and what school of thought you're looking at it from. Okay, but I keep avoiding, questions that have to do with numbers that are plans we have cast in figures. I'd rather we deal with the real issues, because what we're actually discussing today is a financial plan that you have just cast in figures. We're not discussing revenue, we're discussing projection.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we now say we have 16 billion, okay, available for the Ministry of Finance, then we can now begin to now discuss the pros and cons. But what it is we have is an allocation. And remember that allocation you have has to be driven by revenue.
It has to depend on the revenue.
Sorry?
I mean, it has to depend on revenue.
Beautiful. So if you don't have that projected revenue, and that is where I think our focus should be on, leaving the dollar at 1,400, is a good for me. It's fine. It's fair. But I'm a little bit worried, with the price of the oil at $64, because I think the American Energy Commission has predicted that, the price of crude might not exceed $55 for the whole of 2026. In fact, it's going to be oscillating between $52 and $55. So the $64 mark worries me a little bit, especially as it has to do it's a major revenue driver here. Now,
so you are saying the FG is somehow over-ambitious about that particular assumption?
well, I think it's a little. It's not a question of being ambitious. It's a question of being realistic. You know, everybody can be ambitious, but you need to look at the things as they are in themselves. If the world global prices of crude the world market is predicting that crude is going to be selling for not more than $55, it's not ambitious, you know, to put it at 64.
So it's
not ambitious at all. So it's not being ambitious. I mean, it's unrealistic. So let's call it what it is. All right. Now, we haven't done more than 1.2 million barrels of oil. Again, I think that the 1.8 million barrels a day is a little bit, again, for me, in my view, a little unrealistic. I mean, we should proceed with caution, more so that we are talking about revenue. And you see, the government has made a lot of promises, you know, to say this time around things are going to be different. And then also considering that 2025, you know, had its challenges of revenue to the point that it was only at the third quarter that government was able to, you know, raise about 18 trillion out of the projected 24 trillion or 25 trillion in view. And that made, you know, the capital expenditure not go beyond 17-18%. That's the point I'm trying to make. So if we are going to be walking this talk, yes, we can look at all those figures, but we should be able to say, okay, these figures are just assumptions. That's what they are. Assuming that this happens, then this will happen. It's not as if we have that money in the bag, and I think it's important that point is understood and made very clear.
Okay. Now, well, with these tax reforms, do you see the possibility of possibly achieving our revenue targets for 2026?
Again, it depends on the school of thought. There's a school of thought that believes that, you know, if you tax more, then you lose more. Okay, and that is not a good way to go. All right. But there's another school of thought that believes that, okay, taxation is good, and that's why we now remember that Nigeria adopted what you call the pay as you earn. Now, if you're also going to that pay as you earn, it drives back to productivity. Okay, and they say, oh, people who cannot pay, are not earning some level of finance, you know, are not to be paying tax. And then just oppose that against projections of the World Bank that is putting, you know, those under the breadline at over 120 million. Now, if 120 million people are not paying tax, or much more than that, I think some reports are even taking it up to 148 million out of 200 and something million people. Then it does not mean that the remaining 70 million are able to pay tax. Now you have identified those, okay, who can't pay. Then you also now, in that 70 million, you're going to be identifying those who are underemployed. So this is not a straight, Musa, is not a straight yes or no answer. It requires some very critical and deep thinking, so that as you now grow your productivity, and then in growing your productivity, that's again where, you know, the second challenge comes in. What do you require to grow productivity? You know, energy is important, transportation is important, security is important. So it becomes some kind of chicken and egg thing. But what's important, you know, from what the president said in the UAE, is the climate change, climate smart agricultural practices that is introduced or that the government wants to pursue. It is something I am practicing, so I know it is very applicable. Okay.
Okay, doctor. Before I let you go, just quickly, based on your words, I'll use your words. Assumption, based on the assumption that, okay, these allocations will go to these, assuming we realize this particular revenue and things like that. Okay, infrastructure and power. Will the 3.49 trillion naira for works and 1.11 trillion naira for power effectively address roads and electricity challenges in the country?
It will make an impact if the money is available. Okay, maybe the word is not assumptions. Okay, maybe we should be able to, if it is supported, you know, with cash backing. Because right now, they are not cash backed. They are going to be, you know, waiting for revenue to be able to cash back them. If you have all those monies allocated to it, the only thing I know that will not change there will be the allocations to the Ministry of Finance, because, you know, a lot of those transfers, the statutory transfers, the debt service, you know, must happen. Then maybe, you know, the recurrent expenditure But when you go to capital, that is where all your borrowings are going to be coming from. And then remember that your local projections are based on these, factors that we have now looked at. Okay, so I needed for everybody to be a little bit more, understand what the thing is. It's not as when people talk about 58 trillion. I think last year we had 54 trillion. And out of the 54 trillion, we didn't spend more than 17% of what was budgeted against capital. That is being realistic.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Emeka Okengwu. It was a pleasure having you.